Hi, I'm Steve Knutson. I'm a Microsoft MVP for Office Apps and Services, and today I'm going to give you a demo of how to run a workflow at the end of the retention period for a document inside SharePoint. So we start by going into the Purview Admin Center, which is purview.microsoft.com. Then under Solutions, we're going to go down to our Records Management option here. Now, you do need E5 for some of the functionality I'm about to show, which gives you the full records management capabilities. In here, what I'm going to do is create a file plan. I want to show you one I've created earlier, so we'll keep this video nice and short. But essentially with a file plan, what we're going to do is we are going to set up our retention label, and then we're going to apply a policy to it. So I'm just going to skip through here so we can put optional descriptions and so on in. Click next through to the next screen. We can optionally put in a reference business categories, the subcategory that relates to. We can link it back to an authority type. So, for example, is it a regulatory requirement for this document? And we can even provide a citation, so a link to detail about why that retention is required. We'll jump through to the next screen. On the next screen, what we want to do is we want to choose the option here to retain the item forever or for a specific period of time. Now, it's kind of that or for a specific period of time piece that's the most interesting for this one here. So we'll choose that. What I've done is I've changed the default retention from 7 years to 1 day. Now, the reason I've done that is because if I have a 7-year retention policy and I'm testing, I don't have the time to wait 7 years to see if it's going to work at the end. So I'm going to start with 1 day, and you can do that and then change the policy later. So if you're testing policies, just set it to 1 day, which is the minimum period. What I'm going to do at the end of this, I'm going to say, I'm just going to choose the default option here again, which is retain the item even if the user deletes it. And then on the next screen, so what to do at the end of the retention period, I'm going to choose this option down here to run a Power Automate workflow. Now, one reason why we might want to do that is because if we choose the disposition review, what that does is that sends it to a reviewer to approve what happens to that document. So is it safe to delete? Do we need to archive it? Is there some other action we want to take? However, it doesn't keep a very detailed audit trail of what's happening there. So maybe you want to actually keep a lot more detail of the document that you're about to dispose of. So who approved it, all of the metadata related to it, etc. So you'll see I've chosen this, and then what I've done is I've picked this workflow here called Purview Disposition Review. Now, that workflow itself is one that I've created. So I'm just going to jump over quickly to Power Automate. In Power Automate, what I've done is I've created a instant Cloudflow, and I've used the trigger when an item reaches the end of retention period. So this is a premium license required for this action. But once you've got that, what it lets you do, if I expand this option out here, is it lets you return the site address, the library name, and the item ID of the document. So from there, we can then use other Power Automate features like approvals, for example, to send it through an approval. We can also capture that metadata and store it somewhere, so into a list, for example. If we want to create a list of all of the documents that we've disposed of, if we've got lots of data, we might want to store that somewhere else. But as a basic thing, we could use a list. We can even have a multi-level approval, and we can use that, and then this flow will trigger on the end of the retention period for each document that runs that's in the system that has a label applied. So once I've done that, I just click Next, review my settings, and then I'm going to edit the label. So in the label here, I've got a publish this label to M365 locations. So I'm done. Do that. So we're now publishing our label. And we're just going to choose, I'm just going to skip through here. I'm using an adaptive scope. And in an adaptive scope, we can use things like the site URL or an attribute like the department. But actually, we can also use refinable strings or search managed properties from in search to drive rules here as well. So let's click Next through here. And you'll see in here, we can set up pay-as-you-go if you want to use AI-based tagging, but we won't do that. What we'll do instead is we'll go to our scopes option here, and I'm going to choose my test policy, this one here. So let's just have a wee look at what test policy is. In adaptive scopes, which is kind of hidden away under settings and then adaptive scopes inside the Purview portal, you can create an adaptive scope here. So I'm just going to look at this one. And what I've done is, again, I'm going to skip through a couple of screens. I'm going to apply this to SharePoint sites in this case. But then what I've done is I've applied a refinable string. So I've configured a refinable string in Search. Over here, my refinable string 6, which is mapped to my document type value. So I'm using the document type site column mapped to a refinable string, and then I'm using that refinable string in my adaptive scope. So that will mean documents that have that value that are in the sites that I point this policy at will fit into that criteria for this particular scope. And I'm going to submit that, and we're done. And then if I just click back over into here and go out of there, so now I choose that scope. So I'm just going to add the scope, and actually I didn't do it. So I'll choose that one, choose add. Now I've got the scope in here. One other thing which I have is, it's a little thing that's in the right here, is I've specified some SharePoint sites down here. So I can just say just SharePoint, so rather than OneDrive or Exchange. And then finally, once I've done that, I can give my policy a name. So manage policy document lifecycle. I might want to use a name that kind of will be useful later. And then once I've done that, you'll see it's going to come up here and give me a little bit of detail about this, and that it's going to keep the document for one day. Then it's going to apply to SharePoint sites. It's going to use this manage policy document lifecycle. And I am done. So now once I've done that, what can happen in Purview is it can take a while for the labels to become active, up to 7 days in some cases. So now what we need to do is the waiting game. We wait for that to get to the for a few days. We should see the documents starting to show up in our Purview admin portal on the front page. So we go to here. If we scroll down, we should see under our records management front page. So I'm just going to go down into here. This is my development environment, so don't judge what you're seeing on that screen. You'll see in here pending dispositions on here, and other label activity happening down here. So you'll see some information starting to show in here, but actually in the flow itself, you should see that flow triggering at the end of the life cycle of those documents as they're going through. So that's the process. Kind of easy, really, and